Signing day rolls on. I'm Adam Gorney. This is Brandon Drumm from OUInsider. And Brandon, another great class for Oklahoma, very strong. And it starts at the top. David Stone, best
Yep.
defensive tackle in this class. Was there any concern as the recruitment went on that Oklahoma was going to lose out on a kid who was an in-state kid that went to IMG, or was there confidence along the way that he was going to end up back in Norman?
Look, that whole recruitment was it was depending on who you talk to, I guess is the best way to put that. Because at one point it seemed like it was all Oklahoma, and then Michigan State looked like they might be Oklahoma's competition moving forward. Miami made a late push. I know with their collective and everything, they threw hordes of money at him. But even when that was going on, I made the trip up there to the announcement. Um, I remember being with Adam Freeman. I turned to him and said, "Look, uh, Oklahoma still thinks he's theirs. That's why I'm up here." And there's that confidence that they just had the whole time. And I know David said that he flipped a coin and he did all this and that, but at the end of the day, I think it was Oklahoma the whole time for him. He just had to get his family along because there was several family members that wanted him down there in Miami. They wanted to move down there to Miami and all that, but his heart was at Oklahoma from the get go. He tried to commit 3 different times, and the people around him kind of, reined that back in. And still, at the end of the day, he signed with Oklahoma, so it was the biggest get for Oklahoma at the defensive tackle position since Gerald McCoy, which is saying something because that's back almost 20 years.
Years, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I remember him coming to Rivals events and seeing him around the country as like an eighth grader. And you can't get out of your mind that he's undersized, but now he's not undersized at all. He's like 6'4, 6'5", 282, a monster,
Yeah,
dominant. Where do you think Oklahoma uses him, and
everywhere,
how does that kind of work out?
everywhere. I think he'll
Yeah.
be it. If you watched Oklahoma's defense, even Clemson's defense over the years, I mean, you got Tyler Davis, who they would slide inside and outside because of his size, right? You would have Jalen Redmond. Uh, you would have Rondell Bothroyd. He would be slide inside, outside. And I think that's what you're going to see out of David Stone, but you're going to get a lot more production than you got from Redmond and Bothroyd with David Stone. I think even as a freshman, he's just that talented. I even had a source in Oklahoma tell me that getting David Stone and Jaden Jackson in the same class was like getting Brian Breesy and Tyler Davis in the same class in their minds, which they both were in 2 different classes, one 2019, one 2020. But they said that was they just have such high expectations for both those guys to come in, play early, produce early, and just have a quick 3-year career at Oklahoma and then be off to the NFL. It's kind of the mindset everybody has with those two.
I've heard that Brent Venables has been telling offensive linemen that he needs to bring in much more beef and tougher guys to deal with the SEC. I don't know if that's true or not. Eddie Pierre-Louis is definitely one of them. Was definitely a 5-star candidate for us. He ended up outside of it. I sort of regret that just because of his athleticism, but is he the one guy that could possibly block Stone in this class?
Probably him, and I would probably say BJ Brooks or Eugene Brooks, whatever you want to call him. I think both those guys are the 2 guys in Oklahoma's O-line class that everybody looks at and say, "Yep, those are it." I also kind of feel like Daniel Akinkumi out of England, out of the NFL Academy. I think he's severely underrated in the fact that his length, his athleticism, he's just so raw right now. I think when I spoke to, and this from one of the higher up sources at Oklahoma, and they looked me square in the eye and they said, "Man, if anybody's going to come in and be the superstar that they feel like could be one of those surprise first round picks down the line, they think it's Akinkumi because they said his length is just absurd. They just said he understands how to work because he was at that NFL Academy for
Yeah.
years. So he understands the professional side of it because that's all he's ever been taught. So they think he's going to be able to come in. He's a workaholic, be able to play, but it's one of those deals where it's going to probably be a year, probably a 2025 before you see a lot of production there with him. Whereas with Eddie Pierre-Louis and BJ Brooks, you think both those guys can come in and be rotation guys. It may not start, but be rotation guys as freshmen. You saw that with Caden Green this past year. He's obviously at Missouri now. But the hope is that both BJ Brooks and EPL, Eddie Pierre-Louis, that both those guys come in and rotate early and play often.
It was a strange year at running back for us because a lot of the top guys didn't do many events. Taylor Tatum is one of them. We ended up with him at number 1. What is Oklahoma getting in him, and can he be sort of an all-purpose guy, do you think, or is he much more of a kind of between the tackles speed guy?
He's a speed guy, but he's thicker than people realize. I think he's close to 195 as far as his size. He's a good 5'11". He is Gavin Sawchuk a little bit more beefed up. He's able to line up at the wide receiver position like Sawchuk. You're able to use him out in space. I think that's the one thing with him is he's a center fielder, which means the dude can fly, he can catch, he's going to be able to run out in space. He plays both sports, baseball and football. You're getting an athlete. You're getting a multifaceted football player that is going to be able to cause mismatches on the outside. Now, as he gets up in that 205, 210 range, as he goes through his strength and conditioning, I think he's going to be better between the tackles, as a sophomore and junior, obviously, than he is as a freshman. But he's going to be a guy that's going to play some as a freshman. I think there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Oklahoma's hoping that's the case. They want a guy that is, thicker. He's only going to get a couple of months in the strength and conditioning, so maybe 200 is what he'll probably be looking at. But he's still an elite talent, an elite player. And when you watch him play and you watch his film at Longview, it pops. Everything he does pops, and that's probably why he's number 1 right now.
Last thing, you can't talk Oklahoma without talking quarterbacks. They bring in 2 this year, Hawkins and Zerbrug, and then they have Kevin Sperry committed in 2025. They're set up pretty well for the Hall here, huh?
Yeah, like Hawkins and Zerbrug are already on campus, and both those guys have performed well in strength and conditioning walkthroughs. They're just starting to do 7-on-7s right now. The one thing everybody talks about is Hawkins. If he can, get his feet a little bit more tightened up, and that's crazy to say with somebody with his athleticism, right? His feet. But you're talking about, when you talk about feet with him, it's more so just technique. It's more so the fundamental side of it. Except if you can get the mental side, the technique side, everything down, he's got an elite arm. And this is coming from people that see him every day. He's performed well. He's working hard. Zerbrug's a little bit more raw right now. He's a bigger guy. He's still really athletic, but he's more raw than Hawkins is right now. So I expect Hawkins to be competing with Casey Thompson, obviously the experienced transfer that came into Oklahoma for that number 2 spot. And then with Kevin Sperry in 2025, yeah, they're set. He's a guy that I feel can push for top 100 as, he goes through the camps. And I think he will. He's proved that last year in the Elite 11, where a lot of people felt like that's the guy should be going to the Elite 11 finals. But he was he's an underclassman, so they couldn't do that. If he can do that again, I think he's a guy that's going to pop and really turn heads throughout the summer.
All right, that's Brandon Drumm from OUInsider. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you, guys.